Welcome, Giora. It's a real pleasure to have you with us here. It wasn't easy to convince Giora to be on stage. And I'll start with some details that I think some in the audience maybe do not know. So Giora was born in Kibbutz Manara, served not in 8200 but as a mempe in Golani, and completed a PhD in physics. Giora had a long and amazing career in high-tech. What brought you to actually incorporate a health tech company, Itamar Medical, back then in 1997?
So the truth is, I was not aware of the fact that I'm creating a healthcare company. Professor Danny Gur, who was the magician at the time of open heart surgery, he brought it to Israel. He was a neighbor of mine, and actually the contractor, like in many of those fairy tale stories, that built my house and his house, said, listen, there's a guy here that you might want, etc., etc. And that led to Danny and I meeting together. It was Friday afternoon. Giora, it's going to be a very short session. I thought we have guests. That short session took from 4 o'clock till midnight. If you knew Danny, he never stops. So the bottom line, he was looking for someone to measure a very unique signal in the finger, which we ended up calling PET, the peripheral arterial tone signal. And that signal has actually evolved into a company. So to me, healthcare, high-tech, healthcare, drugs, medical devices, it was all same. Through many mistakes, I learned that it's not exactly same.
So we will go over some steps in creating a health tech company, but we will start from your background related to universities and academia. So Giora was my chairman when I was the CEO of ISUM. It was a pleasure working together, and you then went to be the chairman of the board of the Tel Aviv University, so you have a great perspective of 2 universities. Having founded a company that is based on a technology coming practically from the Technion, what would you say are the main keys for a successful transfer from an academia to building a real company?
I believe that first and foremost is the understanding of the academic innovators, to understand the fact that innovation doesn't actually stop at the medical innovation. There's another leg which is called business innovation. And I guess we both worked together with Professor Uri Banin, which was, still is, one of the more brilliant professors in Tel Aviv University. And after one of the sessions, he came to me and said, Giora, I never realized there's any innovation in business. He gave away everything he had to a big company, bad agreement, misunderstandings. Yaacov then had to go in and clean some of the mess. But the bottom line, first and foremost, is the understanding of the researcher, to what point he can go and from what point he should give control to somebody else. I would say this is point 1. Point 2 is the ability to understand whether this is the time to build a company or not. If you want to learn one of the mistakes that we made in Itamar, we started it way too early. How do you know that you started it way too early? We had 1,200 peer-reviewed articles from Nature to you name it. So we didn't really understand what we were doing at the time that we started. In hindsight, if I knew then what I know today, we probably would have started the company 10, 15 years later.
Just to complete the story of Uri Banin, actually, yesterday we had a talk of Dr. Stefan Oshman from Merck. Eventually, Merck acquired QLight, and actually it's a great thing for Israel. They have the hub for the R&D of liquid crystal inside the campus of the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, so it became a success. Now we are gearing up a little bit and to some controversial questions. Many people in Israel claim that there are no good CEOs in the biotech space, unlike what is happening in the high-tech. When do you think a company should look for an Israeli CEO, and when do you think they should prefer a US CEO, and what is your take on the differences in management styles in the high-tech and the biotech in Israel?
I believe that those days are over. This question probably should not have been asked. Just as an example, unfortunately, too close to my home, there's a small company called Abbott Labs that flies my brother to run a business in the US. Another one that came from the same backyard is Gilad Glick, that managed the big company, small company. Those are just two names I've run into in my life. One of them I ran into 62 years ago. But the long and the short of the story, those days are over. There's enough quality managers in Israel. This question should have been asked 20 years ago. Today, I don't believe it has a place.
Giora, I'm raising question for what we call in Hebrew, להרים להנחתה. It's okay. I love your optimistic approach. Now, if you go back and look back to 1997, what were the mistakes you did along the way with Itamar? Because eventually it took you more than 20 years to get it to success. What were the main mistakes?
Well, many mistakes. I can write a book about them, but probably 1,000 of mistakes, if not more. But the basic two mistakes that we have done, the first one is to start a company without having a PCT code. Those of you that are not familiar, when I started, everyone said, you need to have an FDA, you need to have an FDA. FDA is a joke in comparison to getting a code. In the Silicon Valley, I don't believe you can get a meeting today unless you come with a clear path that you do not have to generate a new PCT code. I won't bore you with the story, what it took us to get a PCT code, but I will only hint. First of all, it cost us over $3 million just to pay legal fees and the rest. But it's actually the first time in my business career that I had to bring my Golani skills back and actually threaten the committee that the DNO is not going to be in place and it's not going to be, you won't be able to apply unless you abide by the agreement that we have signed. No, you Israelis are hot-headed. I said, this is not hot-headed. This is a forward-looking statement. A, B, C, D is going to happen unless this thing is being given a true evaluation. It's a long story, but the bottom line is if you don't have a PCT code in mind or how to get there, don't even think about getting started. So that's, I would say, number one. The second one that rises above the rest has to do with the fact that we came with a brochure that said, actually, we don't need the doctors. We can apply, today they would call it AI. In those days, they called it a rule-based engine that would basically, the device with the algorithm basically would give 90–95% of the cases accurate results. So we don't need the doc. Big mistake. First of all, you don't need the doc in any case just to oversee what's happening. But from a business standpoint, to go to a committee where the committee is made out of the docs and to tell them we don't need you and we don't need you and we don't need you, big mistake, which explains a little bit why it was that hard to get the PCT code.
I still remember the days that I was pitching with Gilad Glick, me with my former company that I managed. We went in relatively same times to the NASDAQ and different kinds with NASDAQ IPOs. And so what was, you think, the main factors that actually allowed Itamar to be sold and acquired later on?
First of all, there was a need. There was a need. The alternative was, the basic alternative was to go to a sleep lab. You don't sleep on your bed, it's a mess. There are other alternatives that are cheaper. You know, if you want to measure if somebody is breathing, what's the most natural thing to do? To put an airflow, put it inside, and start the test. We came with a concept that basically said, we'll do it in the finger, and that's the reason why it ended up being so complicated. But first and foremost, there was a need. Secondly, the corona came and helped us because going into a hospital for a sleep test, that wasn't the right thing. So those were the two parameters. One, the basic need, and the timing was driven by an uprise in revenue after the corona.
So we heard before, we had Noam Salomon from Immune AI, that is one of the Israeli unicorns. And we have some successes, but we didn't manage along the years to build here a Novo or a Genentech. What do you think is stopping us from having a real company, as we say, Israeli made in the biotech space?
Let me start with the end. We should have not been here today in 2024 asking how come we don't have such an industry. If you want to have, let's talk about the drug industry. So we know how to create generic drugs. Israel Yaacov is here somewhere. He ran the company very successfully. So drugs that don't require a unique innovation, so to speak, we know how to generate. We know how to run a chemical industry. You go and look at Tower Jazz, which I founded way back when, at Intel. We have enough people that know what a clean room is and what is the chemical industry. And we know to generate IP. The fact of the matter, Yaacov worked in Yisum, there's Amod, there's Adasit. You heard all of them. So we know how to create IP. The problem is that we are extremely happy. Yaacov was happy when he signed an agreement where we got 2%, 1.5%, 1% royalty. I like to go after the 100%. And there's no reason why we should not go after the 100%, having both the innovation engine and the infrastructure of the industry that's there. So in high-tech, we went by one path. We actually brought the multinationals into the country. Dov Fruman, which was my professor, brought Intel. I brought National Semi, and they actually created the foundation for the industry. In medtech, in the pharmaceutical industry, I believe we have two options. One is to go along the path that I just described, which is to bring a multinational into the country. The second path is to do it on our own using the ingredients that we already have, the innovation and the manufacturing infrastructure that exists.
Actually, what you said, we learned the lesson, and for example, in BioLight, my current role, we are doing a concept that we call a build to partner. Meaning that when we see an entrepreneur or a startup in the area of ophthalmology, we invest in it only if we know that we can take it to the partnership point and to get it to the point where it will be a grown-up kid and will be walking on his own. You see a lot of startups as well. What do you think is like...
Maybe one more comment. The advanced VCs in the US today don't measure themselves only by financial parameters. They measure themselves also by number of jobs being created. And one of the problems that we have in Israel is the deepening gap between those that are playing the game, so to speak, and those that are unable to play the game. If you build a real industry, you create the full chain, if you will, of positions. You have the CEO, you have the marketing, you have the sales, and you have secretaries, and you have manufacturing people. You have the whole thing. And unless we do that, we're going to see a bigger and bigger social gap, which could evolve into a serious problem.
We see more and more entrepreneurs coming and showing you the budget for the next 2 years. We will do this animal study. But sometimes we feel that they don't see the vision and how the final product will look like. This is one of the things that we always say in BioLight. This is the tip for the startup and the entrepreneurs. What do you think is the most important thing that you would like to see when someone comes to pitch to you a startup in the healthcare space?
In the healthcare, it's hard for me to say because I mainly invest in the high tech. But I would say for sure, you need to have the founders have a common vision, because some of them would run for the buck as soon as they can, and some of them basically would like to build a real company, a meaningful company. So you do need to make sure, beyond the obvious, that there's a market, that there's a need, and the likes, you need to make sure that the founders are in sync in terms of their vision, in which direction take the company.
So we're getting to the two last questions. We have here in the room a lot of investors, and also we have the chairman of the Israeli Innovation Authority and some other key stakeholders in the Israeli government. How can we encourage more domestic and international investors, especially institutional investors, to invest not only in the high-tech, but also in the health tech space?
The government is going to have to play a role. If the government is not going to play a role, nothing is going to happen, in my view. Today it's an old story, so I can share the numbers. But for every dollar we invested in building up what's today Tower Jazz, we got 54 cents on the dollar. Now, there are many obstacles along the way because of this regulation, other regulation. Some money was given for training, some money was given for infrastructure, some money was given under the regular law. But at the end of the day, 35% plus 10% plus 5%, et cetera, got us to 54 cents on the dollar. Unless the government is willing to participate, it will not develop, unfortunately. Actually, when you were running ISUM, we were approached by Roche to develop in Israel a stem cell center that would do prototyping. So here you have a big company that understands that we have the IP, that we have the intellectual capabilities, asking us to do it. I had endless discussions with the Ministry of Finance, but same stories we had in the semiconductor industry. Today, everyone will tell you, for sure, I've supported the problem that most of the people in the finance industry have. Their positions are short-term. They are being measured by how many jobs are being created over their term, which could be 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Those industries, and especially if you're talking about bio, the results will be seen after 15, 20 years. With the political system that we have, but not unique to us, I believe in other countries as well, unless you have the government jump in and put money into it, I don't think it'll happen.
Actually, you mentioned one of the obstacles. We don't have here significant R&D centers of multinational companies in the biotech like the hundreds that we have in the high-tech, and I hope it will be changed. And for the last question, during the lunch break, you will probably be approached by startups here trying to get your attention as a potential angel investor. If you will have to say in 2 sentences, what will buy your attention in a fast elevator pitch? What is your dream product?
I don't think it's a single characteristics. It's actually the sum of all. Obviously, you need to get to a point where you have the first meeting that someone is willing to spend 2 hours. And that's really the personality of the individual, because this road is a roller coaster. You know, I made, in hindsight, maybe it wasn't a mistake, but I named the company after a brother of mine that was killed in Mount Hermon in 73, Itamar. I didn't even think about the fact that the company can fail. Otherwise, why name it after your fallen brother? So you need to look at characteristics of a founder that can take the heat in the kitchen, especially these days, that is going into a roller coaster. Today it looks great, the sun is shining, and tomorrow it's going to be raining. Unless he has the tenacity, don't get started.
And serving in Golani is always an advantage, right? Thank you very much, Giora. It has been a pleasure. Thank you very much.